Yes, it's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. We are in the company of Christopher Dickey, foreign editor of the Daily Beast. Nice to see you, sir.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to see Hamdan Mostafavi of Courrier International, which I see you have a copy of it there.
Yeah, I have.
Which brings you the best of
international press.
Of the international press.
In French.
Wrapped up in one magazine-sized bundle. Angela Diffley of sister station Radio France International's English language service. Hey, Angela. And France 24's very own Douglas Herbert. The World This Week, where you can react on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag World This Week. Another all-nighter in Brussels. That was on Thursday night, and we could be headed towards another all-nighter on Friday. They're negotiating with David Cameron. David Cameron, who arrived for that EU summit full of oomph.
Hi, good afternoon. Well, we've got some important work to do today and tomorrow, and it's going to be hard. I'll be battling for Britain. If we can get a good deal, I'll take that deal, but I will not take a deal that doesn't meet what we need. I think it's much more important to get this right than to do anything in a rush. But with goodwill, with hard work, we can get a better deal for Britain.
Angela Diffley, the clock is still ticking on that summit.
It is, and for a deal which has already been roundly rubbished by most of the very Eurosceptic press in Britain. So if he gets
So why are they still bargaining if it's just brinkmanship here?
It's not in many ways, but it is viewed as such in Britain. And I think Cameron is well aware of that. And he will, if he gets a deal, quickly want to move on and put the debate on a completely different territory, talk about the fact that if Britain does withdraw from the European Union, it will have no say in laws which it will have to abide by. He will talk about how the United States wants Britain to stay in Europe and how we have a unique position, and if we pull out of Europe, that will be jeopardised. He will remind people that much of what irritates them about the European Union is actually globalisation, which is a fact, and not necessarily to do with the European Union. He needs to move the debate onto completely different territory.
All right. Now, when the day began, The Independent, anticipating the outcome, cartoonist Dave Brown predicting another Brussels fudge. Perhaps we can show that cartoon. There it is there. However, it really does look at this point that it is up in the air.
It is, and we hear that the Greeks are doing a little bit of blackmail as well, saying
blackmail is how you put it.
Well, I'm not alone. It's all over the press, saying that if we don't get a pledge on borders, then we won't back the Brexit deal. On the one hand, it's shocking. On the other hand, that's how Europe operates. And we've seen this sort of stuff before. I mean, we tend to forget now that the Nice Treaty was rejected by Ireland. It was refashioned and given back to them, and they voted against it. You know, when countries say we can't do that, we won't do that, Europe bends to their demands very often. So although everyone is saying, you know, how dare Britain hold everyone hostage, that's how Europe works.
I think it's this extraordinary choreography going on here. You know, Europe literally.
But they're not following the script.
Well, they're following the script to the.
Remember the predictions where we'd have an English breakfast on Friday.
Yes, in England we haven't had that, and apparently Angela Merkel went out to get some frites in Brussels instead. She couldn't stand the food they were serving. But no, I mean, look, you have this sense where the Europe, the irony here, Europe groveling, bending over backwards, throwing everything in the kitchen sink, essentially at Cameron. Obviously, there's a lot of frustration. They think that a lot of the Brits are spoiled brats. You know, they've already gotten a lot. They're out of the Eurozone. They're not in Schengen. They haven't signed a lot of the police and judicial cooperation conventions. They never signed the Fundamental Charter on Rights. It's essentially almost like they're out of the EU, except they're still bound by the treaty. But here you have the Europeans groveling, bending over backwards to try to make Cameron look all valiant and brave and good and like he's battling for Britain, as he says. And at the same time, you have the Eurosceptics, like you said, back in Britain, basically saying no matter what he brings back, it's rubbish. We're not taking it. It's extraordinary, and it's extraordinary that it's come to this because a political opportunistic politician back in January 2013, David Cameron, threw out this referendum as a bone to the Eurosceptics, and now here we are.
We hear that a lot. I think we are starting to forget that had he not done that, and yes, you know, we're all aware of the political imperatives at the time, had he not done that, this clamour looking at the migrant crisis in Europe, the clamour for Britain to leave the European Union with UKIP would have grown and grown and grown. I think it's naive to pretend that had he not offered a referendum, it would have simply died away.
And that brings us to an important point. I'll put it to you, Christopher Dickey. Do we underestimate David Cameron? Oh, he's fair game every day these days in the British press, but we laughed at him until he won that general election.
Off camera, we were laughing at him just now. You know, when he was speaking, everybody was like, "Oh my God," because he's like a parody of himself. Now we may in fact underestimate his political skills. He won big, he won an absolute majority. So you have to respect that. It was a bad idea probably to call for this referendum. But as Angela points out, what else could he have done at that point? He could have tried to dance around this issue, but he would have had to address it sooner or later. He has to address the Eurosceptics somehow. And if he can get the British people behind him in the referendum, which is really the big question, then he won't have to listen to those Eurosceptics, at least not seriously, for a long time to come after that. So I think all of that is pretty wise politics, actually.
All right, voters can be fickle. The various polls don't really give a clear signal of what the mood will be in the final weeks before a vote. Remember that we still don't have a referendum date. Cameron, if he gets a deal this weekend, some saying it could be as early as this June. If he doesn't, well, it's anyone's guess. It'll be late 2016, perhaps early 2017. So it's hard to say what those poll numbers actually mean. But what is clear, and it was something that was mentioned by several of our panelists, Hamdan Mustafavi, is a lot of people in Brussels are angry, feeling that to help David Cameron, the rest of the 27 are holding up the more important conversation in their eyes on the refugee crisis.
Yeah, of course. And there were many countries south of the EU that are suffering the most from the migrant crisis. Greece, we saw that, Spain, Italy. They're all saying, why are we listening to the blackmail, as you said, of Britain? We have more big problems to deal with. So they're saying, just let them go. We don't care about Britain. Let's solve now this problem. And Angela Merkel, she's really prying on people to take care of the migrant crisis. Nobody talks about it, and it's really now the most pressing issue.
Well, Britain is a major economy, and if the migrant crisis is to be solved, it could do with a major economy. So it does need to be addressed.
Yeah, but you got to say, Britain is not a team player in Europe. I mean, if you imagine trying to run a sports team with 28 members, and one of them's always off the field. One of them doesn't want to play by the rules. One of them says, before I come on the field, I'm going to ask you to change the entire rule book. I think Europeans are just awfully tired of that. And I think you see that reflected in a lot of European opinion.
And it's, the Greek PM, he said explicitly today, he says, we're ready to help the UK. That's all fine and well. But look, we right now are dealing with a major crisis, and it's hitting us in the here and now today, because the Turkey summit was canceled at this thing after the terror attack. So that's been put off to March 6th now. And they're literally saying that the Schengen could collapse by then. You have thousands still coming over across the Aegean every day. It is the referendum isn't until June. If it happens, right?
But
so,
Brexit seems to trump all because you have this precedent that would be set of a nation leaving the European Union.
And because the two issues are linked, and the refugee crisis has been going on for 6 months. It's not a sudden emergency. It's been going on for a very long time.
But it's getting worse. It is getting worse by the day, because especially with Austria,
but,
right?
If it continues to get worse and the Brexit summit is postponed,
but
would that be better timing?
Don't you think?
Probably not.
I mean, maybe you could beg to differ, but I mean, it does seem to me, and I know it sounds like the boy who cried wolf. The migrant crisis is always a make or break thing, but it really does seem now that Angela Merkel is getting to the point where she's really getting isolated. She was able to hold the fort on her own for a while, and she's coming under a lot of pressure. It seems like everything's coming to a head at once on this issue.
Isolated from more quarters than one. The French Prime Minister last weekend visiting an asylum seekers shelter in Munich. Here's what Manuel Valls had to say.
France did not make the claim that they were willing to welcome hundreds of thousands of refugees and migrants. We are by no means judging Germany for doing so. We are supportive of Germany in these very difficult times.
we're supporting Germany, but we didn't ask for all these migrants. Is he throwing the Germans under the bus there?
Well, I think he's trying to protect his own flank is what he's trying to do, especially on the right. I mean, the one thing we haven't brought up is the possibility that if Britain decides in this year or early next year that they're going to pull out of the European Union, there's a lot of movement with other countries, including in France, to pull out of the European Union. Now, if France goes, that's it. There is no more European Union. We could see the collapse.
How serious is that?
Well, I don't know. Do you think Marine Le Pen will get into the second round of the elections? I do. So I'd say it's pretty damn serious because that's her platform.
She said it. She said,
That's
Marine
right,
Le
it's
Pen,
her
she said she admires David Cameron. She loves what he's doing. This isn't me saying it. She said it. She said she would like France to get special treatment and she would like to have a referendum. That's on the record. Her own statement. You know?
I agree. Should she be elected? But whilst she's almost certain to get into the second round, I don't think she's likely.
Well, you know,
But she will pull the entire political landscape further
Exactly.
right. I mean, just her very being in the second round will be a major blow to. We've already seen the French right going further right as a result. What Valls just said, Manuel Valls, you know, that's not a statement of a socialist of a year or two ago, at least even when Hollande first came to power. And another statement, which wasn't even in that soundbite we just heard, was France never said come to France. He said that last week. He said specifically.
Actually, a lot of them don't want to come to France, do they? Because of the economic
but that
situation.
isn't the issue.
No, but the other, there was some, I forget which senior EU official said Germany made a unilateral offer and has expected solidarity, and it's a kind of a bizarre way of operating.
And they forget when that happened. That happened in September after the Island Kurdi tragedy. And
The 3-year-old boy who wound up dead on a beach.
Yeah, and suddenly the whole of Europe said we have to do something. And then Cologne happened for New Year, and again it changed, and they realized they can't deal with this major crisis. But I think something that's important too is to say what the EU brings to the UK. I think the debate should now emerge also in Britain. I mean, on the diplomatic matter, the UK really doesn't exist without the EU. There's also good things coming from the EU to the UK, and I think now it's beginning to
Massive
show a
farm
bit.
subsidies for one.
Of course, for the
Huge.
farm
I
subsidies.
totally
And
agree.
actually, if one country starts to get special treatment, of course, every country now wants special treatment. But we see less Europe brings us more of extreme right in Europe, more of self-importance, and not thinking what this problem they have to tackle, migrant crisis and terrorism. It's all things that need, and climate change, everything. It's things that need to be dealt on a bigger scale. So I don't see how going all alone, each one of them is going to help in that.
All right, reactions on the hashtag world this week. The migration crisis and its influence on Britain will actually play a vital role, and I think Cameron will have his way. All right, so that's one opinion there. We were mentioning how there was supposed to be a mini summit with Turkey. That didn't happen because of the bomb blast on this Wednesday in Ankara. On that score, we've had a claim of responsibility from a splinter group of the PKK, the Turkish separatist movement. Hamdan Mustafavi, your thoughts on this attack that happened right in the heart of the Turkish capital?
I think Turkey is paying for its policies for long years now. You have to remember that a year ago, Turkey was still in a peace process with the Kurds, and now they're fighting them in Syria. They're fighting them in their own country. There is also the big threat of ISIS just at the borders of Turkey. Russia is also playing a big role now as it's supporting the Kurds of Syria. So Erdogan has put his country in a mess, and now when you don't bring peace, you bring war.
And for Erdogan, the best defense seems to be offense. He says he's going to bring up the matter with Barack Obama, the Turkish president, this Friday at the funerals of those killed in Wednesday's bomb blast, saying that he blames Kurds on both sides of the Turkish border. He's angry at Washington for supporting the Syrian Kurds in their fight against ISIS. Late on Thursday, the U.S. State Department reacting, saying that whether or not Kurds are responsible is an open question. Quote, we're in no position to confirm or deny the assertions made by the Turkish government. What do you do if you're Washington, Christopher Dickey?
Well, you remain skeptical for the time being. Skepticism serves Washington's interests at the moment because Washington is in bed with a branch of the PKK. That's who's doing the most aggressive fighting against ISIS in part of Syria.
The YPG, those Syrian
Well,
Kurds?
let's not do the alphabet soup. Yes, the YPG and the PYD, which are really part of the PKK, even though we choose in the United States to say they're not because we don't want to say that we're in bed with a group that we've already said is a terrorist organization, which is the PKK. Is that confusing enough? Of course it is. But that's the nature of that fight right now. Everybody in Turkey understands it, and Washington understands it. What they also understand, and the reason they phrase that statement that way, is that they don't trust the Turkish secret services either. They are really concerned that a bombing like this may not be entirely the work of those nasty Kurdish separatists. It may even conceivably be the work of somebody who wants to fuel the fire of war against those separatists, especially against the ones in northern Syria. So that's the kind of thing that the State Department is taking into account. And I think every Turk will read that statement and say, Washington thinks there's something fishy about this attack.
Yeah, and you have to remember that the big attack in Ankara, the last one, was in a pro-Kurdish rally. So
it was during the election campaign. Now,
Targeting Kurds.
the Syrian Kurds, meanwhile, across the border, grabbing land that Sunni rebels have lost to a Russian-backed Syrian government offensive, making it, well, effectively a three-way fight in the north between the Kurds, Assad, and ISIS. Hence, Turkey's cross-border shelling of Syrian Kurds.
Tabii biz bu koridorun oluşturulmasına müsaade etmeyeceğiz.
We will not allow the formation of this corridor. This is the reason for what is happening in Azaz.
Ve bütün bizim top atışlarımız buna
Shellings will continue to prevent this. As Turkey, we will not sit and watch the formation of an illegitimate zone on our border.
asla türbünden izleyicisi olmayacağız.
Turkey, a NATO member, let's say.
Yeah, NATO member. Well, look, here's what will not happen. And watch, tomorrow I'll be proven wrong. What will not happen is Turkish troops crossing the border and basically marching in to try to prevent further land grabs, as they call it, to try to prevent the formation of this autonomous Syrian Kurdish region that could then link up with the PKK in southeast Turkey. That's not going to happen. They'd need Washington to sign off on that. Doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. But more importantly, they would need air cover, and Russia is
Wouldn't you have thought
there.
that they would
Russia's
have
there
needed...
with its anti-air defenses.
But would they have needed Washington to sign off on shelling across the border?
I'm sure Washington hasn't signed off on the shelling across the border. Washington's been pretty straight and blunt about the fact it wants the shelling to stop. And this is what's outraged Turkey the most. Turkey can't believe that Washington has the gall to lump Turkey and the Syrian Kurds all in one category, asking both of them to sort of cool it a little bit. How dare you, from Turkey's standpoint?
The bottom line here is that the Russians are coming out winners in this.
Yeah.
All right, we'll pick up on those points and more. Stay with us. You're watching The World This Week.